Hello everybody. Today we're going to be going over frequency tables. Before we do, let's do a little bit of review. The probability of any event happening, remember that's the number of things you think are or would result in a success if they happened, divided by the total number of possibilities, so the number of outcomes. Alright, so my handwriting's really bad today. Please excuse it. As long as you can read it, we're okay. So, for example, when rolling a dice, if you're trying to roll a 1, then your number of successes is only 1 out of 6 possible outcomes. The addition rule of probability. Now, there's 2 addition rules of probability. The one that always works is the probability of A or B happening is equal to the probability of A happening plus the probability of B happening minus the probability of both A and B happening. Okay, this one works for mutually exclusive events and for events that are not mutually exclusive. Once again, remember that word mutually exclusive means cannot happen at the same time. Conditional probability is probability with a condition. And that condition is something else has happened already. So for example, the probability of event A given that event B has already happened. And the way to calculate that is you take the probability of A and B happening, and you divide it by the probability that B will happen. Okay, I like to think of this as modifying your sample space. All right, so we're changing the size of the sample space after B occurs. All right, so today we're going to be working on two-way frequency tables. Now, all a frequency table is just a table that shows how often something happens. So a two-way frequency table shows how often 2 events happened. Now, there are several different things we can use for two-way frequency tables. Uh, for your assignment for yesterday's conditional probability, since we didn't have school that day, you were to take a poll. That's collecting data, which we will use in a two-way frequency table. All right, so for now, this is some data that we collected the other day about the students in our classroom. So in order to make a frequency table, we're going to use this data, and we're going to make a table with the events on the top and side. All right, so here's my table. Okay, so I'm going to put, uh, there's 2 different events that happen. If we pick somebody, they're either a girl or a boy. So I'm going to put girl in this column, and I'm going to put boys in this column. And then our other 2 events are either they play a sport or they do not play a sport. So I'm going to put sport in one row and no sport in another row. I could have put athlete, non-athlete. It doesn't really matter there, as long as we know what we're talking about. So now I put how often each thing happens in this table. So uh, there are 11 girls, 5 play sports. So in the cell right here that's at the intersection of sport and girl, I put a 5 because that's how many girls play a sport. 6 do not play a sport. So girl, no sport, I put 6. Now there's 7 boys, 5 play a sport. So right here at this intersection, I put a 5, and 2 do not. And this is just a general frequency table. Now, often with frequency tables, you're also going to see things where they total things up. So we're going to add another row and another column, and in those, we're going to make totals for the rows and columns. All right, so we add 6 plus 5 and we get 11 girls total. Add 5 plus 2, We get 7 boys total. Okay, for the rows, 5 plus 5 gives me 10. 6 plus 2 gives me 8. And now if we add this row, we get 18. And we should get the same thing when we add these columns together. You can also represent a frequency table using percentages. Each cell would be the total percentage for that event. So for example, for this cell right here, I would divide 5 by the total number of students, and that would be my percentage. Okay, and this one right here would be 6 out of 18. And this would be the total percentage for this one, which if we represent it by a fraction, it's pretty easy. It's just 11 out of 18. If you're doing this as a decimal, then whenever you add all these things together, whenever you add everything up, your total is going to be 1. So you can think about it this way: 11/18 plus 7/18 is 18/18, and it's which is 1. So you want your total percentage to be 1, which makes sense because this is 100% of your data. All right, so let me just go ahead and finish this real quick. All right, and you won't see both things in the table. You'll just see either the raw data, just the numbers, or the percentages. You probably won't see both. And that's how we make a frequency table. Now, sometimes they'll give you a list of stuff, and you actually have to make tallies to figure out exactly how many of this occurred. All right, so now we're going to go into using the frequency table to find probabilities. You can find all the types of probabilities that we've talked about so far, and some more, using frequency tables. To find the union, now usually with frequency tables, the events are going to be mutually exclusive. For example, being a girl and being a boy, those two events are mutually exclusive. Playing a sport and not playing a sport, you can't be in between. You either play a sport or you don't. So that's mutually exclusive as well. So most of the time, frequency tables have mutually exclusive events. So for your union, all you have to do is just use the simple addition property, which is just you add up the probability of the first event and the second event. Now, if you're dealing with the numbers, you would add the two cells and divide by the total. For example, if we wanted to find the probability of a girl that plays a sport or a boy that plays a sport, if we're picking a student at random and we want to find the probability of it being a girl that plays a sport or a boy that plays a sport, you would just add 5 plus 5, and that gives you 10, and then you divide that by 18. For a conditional probability, you just use the row or column as the sample space. So you update your sample space. You're not going to use 18 as your total anymore. If you're finding the probability that it's a boy, given that they play a sport. So let's do probability that it's a boy, given that they play a sport. I really should write out boy, but it's okay. All right, so the probability it's a boy, given that it's a sport. You're going to look only at the sport row. So now we don't have 18 anymore. Now we're dealing with just 10. Okay, so looking at this, there's 5 boys that play a sport out of 10 people total that play a sport. So the probability that they're a boy given that they play a sport is 5 out of 10, or 1/2. You could also say 50%. Now, I did mention intersection as well. We haven't talked about how to find intersection, so I'm not going to go over that in this lesson. That'll be in the next video, and I will mention how to find it using a frequency table as well. But that is all for this video. Hope you have a good one.